Hello, and welcome to what I really hope is a hypothetical scenario for you. If it's not hypothetical, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, stop watching YouTube and find shelter immediately. But assuming you're here for educational purposes, or you're a prepper with a lot of free time, today we're going to talk about how to survive radioactive rain. Now, I want to be clear up front. I am not a nuclear physicist. I am not a hazmat specialist. I am a person who has watched too many apocalypse movies and owns an uncomfortable amount of duct tape. But I have done my research, and more importantly, I have tested some truly ridiculous homemade protection methods so you don't have to. You're welcome. By the end of this video, you will understand what radioactive rain actually is, why it's dangerous, and how to protect yourself using nothing but household junk, garbage bags, and an optimistic attitude. Let's begin. Okay, let's start with the basics. What actually is radioactive rain? And no, it's not when the sky turns green and mutant frogs start falling. That would be easier to deal with, honestly. At least you could see the frogs coming. Radioactive rain, also called fallout rain or black rain, happens when radioactive particles get into the atmosphere and then hitch a ride back down to Earth on water droplets. This can happen after a nuclear explosion, a major reactor meltdown, or theoretically, after certain types of industrial disasters. Here's the simple version. Imagine the atmosphere is a giant sponge. Now imagine someone spilled a bunch of invisible poison dust into that sponge. When it rains, that sponge gets squeezed, and all that poison dust comes down with the water. Congratulations, you now have contaminated precipitation falling directly onto everything you love. The dangerous part isn't usually the water itself. It's the radioactive particles suspended in the water. These particles can include things like cesium-131, iodine-131, and strontium-90. I know those sound like rejected robot names, but they're actually isotopes that can cause serious harm if they get on your skin, in your lungs, or, worst of all, inside your body through drinking water or food contamination. The good news is that unlike radiation from a direct blast, fallout rain is something you can actually protect yourself from with proper preparation. The particles need to physically touch you or get inside you to do damage. So your goal is simple. Don't let that happen. Easy, right? No. Well, that's why we have the rest of this video. Before we get into the fun part where I duct tape myself into a garbage bag, let's talk about the 3 principles that will actually keep you alive. These are shelter, distance, and dryness. I call them the holy trinity of not dying in contaminated weather. First, shelter. The single most important thing you can do during radioactive rainfall is get inside and stay inside. A solid building with intact walls and a roof will block the vast majority of fallout particles from reaching you. The thicker and more dense the material between you and the outside, the better. Concrete is great. Brick is great. That garden shed made of corrugated tin is less great, but still better than standing outside with your mouth open. The goal is to create as many barriers as possible between you and the contaminated air and water. This is called shielding, and it works because radioactive particles have to physically travel through material to reach you. The more material, the more particles get stopped along the way. Second, distance. This applies both horizontally and vertically. Horizontally, you want to be as far from the fallout source as possible. If you know which direction the contamination is coming from, get to the opposite side of your shelter. Vertically, you want to avoid basements if they might flood with contaminated water, but you also don't want to be right under a leaky roof. Middle floors of buildings are often ideal. Third, and this is the one people forget, dryness. Staying dry is absolutely critical. Wet contaminated material against your skin is much more dangerous than dry contaminated material near your skin. Water helps radioactive particles absorb into your skin and makes decontamination much harder. If you get wet with potentially contaminated rain, you need to remove and isolate your clothing and wash yourself immediately. And I mean immediately, not after you finish your granola bar. Now, these 3 principles will do more to keep you alive than any amount of fancy equipment. But since we're here for the fancy equipment, let's talk about how to build a protective suit out of garbage. Alright, here's where things get fun. And by fun, I mean desperate and slightly ridiculous. Let's talk about how to build a protective suit when you don't have access to actual hazmat gear. Now, real protective equipment is designed to be sealed, breathable through filtered mechanisms, and tested against specific contaminants. What we're building is none of those things. What we're building is a last resort barrier between your fragile human body and radioactive precipitation. It won't make you invincible. It will make you slightly less vulnerable, which in an apocalypse is basically the same thing. Let's start with the base layer. You want to cover as much of your skin as possible with regular clothing. Long sleeves, long pants, socks, gloves if you have them. This layer isn't about radiation protection. It's about creating a surface that can be removed and discarded if it gets contaminated. Think of your clothes as sacrificial armor. They take the hit so your skin doesn't have to. On top of that, you want a moisture barrier. This is where plastic comes in. Garbage bags are your best friend here. Heavy-duty contractor bags are ideal, but regular kitchen bags will work in a pinch. You're going to want to cut holes for your head and arms and wear one like a poncho. Then use a second bag wrapped around your waist and legs. Yes, you will look like a sad, crinkly ghost. Embrace it. The key areas to focus on are your torso, where your vital organs live, and your head, where your brain allegedly lives. For your head, a plastic bag with a cutout for your face is a start, but your face is still exposed. This is where improvisation gets creative. Some people recommend ski goggles or swim goggles to protect your eyes. For your mouth and nose, a wet cloth tied over your face will catch some particles, but it's not a real filter. If you have an actual N95 or P100 respirator, now is the time to use it. If you don't, a tightly woven wet cotton bandana is better than nothing. But understand that it's really not adequate for serious contamination. It's a desperation measure. Now, for the piece de resistance, the tinfoil poncho. I need to address this because I've seen it recommended in some truly unhinged survival forums. The theory is that aluminum foil will reflect radiation and protect you. Here's the truth. Tinfoil does almost nothing against the gamma radiation that fallout particles emit. It's too thin and not dense enough to provide meaningful shielding. However, and this is important, tinfoil is waterproof. So if you're using it as an outer rain layer over your plastic bags, it can help keep you dry, which, as we discussed, is actually valuable. Just don't expect it to make you radiation-proof. You're not building a superhero suit. You're building a rain poncho with delusions of grandeur. For added protection, some people incorporate scraps of sheet metal, like pieces of old signs or car panels, into vests or shoulder guards. The idea here is that denser material does provide better shielding. This is technically true, but the amount of metal you'd need to make a meaningful difference would be so heavy you probably couldn't move. I'll be testing this later in the video. Spoiler alert, it does not go well. Final tip for your suit. Seal every edge with duct tape. Wrists, ankles, neck, waist, anywhere air or water could get in, tape it down. You want to be as close to a sealed unit as possible while still being able to breathe and move. It's a balance between protection and not suffocating. Really makes you appreciate how good we have it in normal times, doesn't it? Now let's talk about your shelter, because having a building over your head means nothing if that building has more holes than a conspiracy theory. The goal here is to make your shelter as airtight as possible while still being able to breathe. Contaminated air can carry radioactive particles inside, so you want to reduce air exchange with the outside as much as you can during the worst of the fallout. Start with the obvious entry points: doors and windows. If you have weather stripping or draft excluders, now is the time to install them. If you don't, you can improvise with rolled up towels, strips of cloth, or even crumpled newspaper pushed into gaps. It won't be perfect, but it reduces airflow. For windows, the best option is to cover them entirely with thick plastic sheeting taped to the frame. Painter's plastic works great for this. Heavy garbage bags cut open and flattened will also work. The key is to tape all four edges completely sealed to the wall, not the glass. You want to create an air barrier, and glass alone isn't going to do that if there are gaps around the frame. Doors are trickier because you might need to use them. For your main entry door, hang a plastic sheet a few feet inside the doorway to create an improvised airlock. When you come in from outside, you enter the space between the door and the plastic. Remove your contaminated outer layers, seal them in a bag, and only then push through the plastic into your clean living area. This prevents you from tracking contamination through your entire shelter. Don't forget about less obvious gaps: electrical outlets, plumbing penetrations, attic hatches, and that weird crack in the corner that you've been meaning to fix for 3 years. Seal everything with tape, plastic, or wet towels. Paranoia is your friend here. Ventilation is a tricky balance. You need some air exchange or you'll suffocate, but you also don't want to be sucking in contaminated air. If you have to open anything, open a single window on the side of the building facing away from the fallout source, and only open it a crack. You can hang a damp sheet in front of it to catch some particles, but this is far from ideal. Honestly, if the fallout is severe, you're better off staying sealed for as long as possible and accepting that the air will get stuffy. One more thing. Water can seep in from unexpected places during heavy rain. Check your shelter for any signs of water intrusion, especially around the base of walls and near windowsills. Contaminated water pooling inside your shelter defeats the entire purpose of being inside. Use towels, buckets, or whatever you have to catch and isolate any water that gets in. Water is essential for survival, obviously, but during and after radioactive rainfall, your usual water sources become potential hazards. Let's talk about how to collect water that won't make your situation worse. First rule, do not drink the rain directly. I know that sounds obvious, but in a survival situation, people get desperate. Contaminated rainwater can deliver radioactive particles directly into your digestive system, which is exactly what you're trying to avoid. No amount of thirst is worth that trade. Second rule, do not drink from open water sources after fallout. Rivers, lakes, ponds, and puddles are all potentially contaminated. Even if they looked fine before, the rain has now deposited particles into them. These sources should be considered unsafe until properly tested, which you probably can't do. So where does that leave us? A few options. Option 1 is water that was stored before the event. Sealed bottles, capped containers, water heaters, and toilet tanks that were filled before the contamination are all likely safe. If you're reading this before the apocalypse, this is your sign to store some water. Seriously, go fill some bottles. I'll wait. Option 2 is collecting water that has been protected from fallout. If you can set up a collection system that only activates after the rainfall has stopped and the contamination has had time to decay or settle, you can potentially collect cleaner water from subsequent normal rain. This is complicated to set up and requires judgment about when the fallout period has ended, so it's not ideal. Option 3 is underground water sources. Wells, springs, and groundwater are generally protected from surface contamination, at least initially. If you have access to a well with a sealed cap, this is probably your safest natural water source. Just make sure the pump mechanism and any exposed pipes are decontaminated before use. Option 4, and this is the one you can actually do with stuff you have lying around, is improvised filtration and distillation. Now, I need to be very clear here. Boiling water does not remove radioactive contamination. I repeat, boiling does not help. In fact, it can concentrate the contamination as water evaporates. Don't do it. However, distillation, where you boil water and collect only the steam, which then condenses into a separate container, can theoretically separate out some radioactive particles because many of them don't evaporate with the water vapor. This is not foolproof, and some contaminants like tritium will come through. But it's better than drinking contaminated water directly. Basic filtration through layers of sand, gravel, and cloth can also remove some larger particles, but it won't catch everything. Activated charcoal filters, the kind used in camping water filters or fish tank filters, can help with some contaminants, but not all. The honest answer is that in a true radioactive contamination scenario, there is no home method that guarantees safe water. Your best bet is stored clean water. Your second best bet is protected underground sources. Everything else is harm reduction. Okay, let's wrap this up with a clear summary. I'm going to give you the practical survival steps that will actually help, and then I'm going to tell you about the things you should absolutely never do, no matter how good an idea they seem at the time. Practical survival steps that actually work. Get inside and stay inside. This is the #1 priority. A solid shelter with walls and a roof is your best protection. Middle floors of buildings are ideal when possible. Seal your shelter. Close all windows and doors. Cover gaps with plastic sheeting and tape. Create an improvised airlock if you need to go in and out. Stay dry. If you get contaminated rain on you, remove your outer clothing immediately and wash your skin. Wet contamination is more dangerous than dry contamination. Protect your skin and airways. Cover as much of your body as possible. Use a mask or respirator if you have one. A wet cloth over your face is a last resort, not a solution. Use stored water. Water that was sealed before the event is your safest option. Underground sources are next best. Do not drink rainwater or from open bodies of water. Decontaminate properly. When coming inside from a contaminated area, remove all outer layers, bag them, and wash yourself thoroughly. Do not track contamination into your clean space. Wait it out. Many radioactive isotopes decay relatively quickly. The longer you can shelter in place, the safer the environment becomes. Patience is a survival skill. Now, things you should absolutely never try. Never go outside during active fallout rain without protection. Even a short exposure can deposit dangerous particles on your skin and in your lungs. Never drink unfiltered water from any source exposed to fallout. Just because it looks clean does not mean it is clean. Radioactive particles are invisible. Never eat food that was exposed to fallout rain. This includes gardens, livestock, and anything stored outside. If you're not sure, don't eat it. Never assume you're safe because you feel fine. Radiation damage can take hours, days, or even longer to show symptoms. Feeling healthy now doesn't mean you weren't exposed. Never try to burn off contamination from objects. This can actually release particles into the air and make things worse. Dispose of contaminated items or seal them away. Never trust homemade protection as a complete solution. Everything we talked about today reduces risk. Nothing eliminates it. The goal is harm reduction, not invincibility. And finally, never believe anyone who tells you that tinfoil will protect you from radiation. It will not. It will make you shiny and crinkly, and that's about it. And that's everything. You now know more about surviving radioactive rain than you probably ever wanted to. You know what fallout is, why shelter and dryness matter, how to build an improvised protective suit that will almost certainly fall apart, how to seal your shelter, how to find safe water, and what definitely does not work no matter what the internet tells you. I hope you never need any of this information. I really do. But if the day comes when the sky turns dark and the Geiger counter starts clicking, at least you'll have a plan. A garbage bag, duct tape, and questionable plan, but a plan nonetheless. If you found this helpful, or at least entertaining, consider subscribing. I have more survival content coming, including how to purify water using only sunlight and regret, and how to build a shelter from furniture when your apartment becomes a bunker. Stay safe, stay dry, stay inside, and whatever you do, stay away from the rain. This has been your friendly neighborhood apocalypse preparedness channel. See you in the next one. Assuming there is a next one.